Hey, how's it going, everybody? Coach Kyle here, and today I want to talk about shin splints, aka medial tibial stress syndrome. This competes with runner's knee in two categories. The first is which name is more misused. The second is which is more common. The reasons are that both of these injuries often come from overuse, doing too much training or intensity too early before the body is ready, aka also not enough regeneration time. Both terms, runner's knee and shin splints, are kind of garbage can terms for any pain in these specific areas of the body. However, just because you have shin pain or knee pain does not mean you have shin splints or runner's knee. Both are actually very specific terms. So let's take a deep dive today into what exactly shin splints are and what you need to know about them. So, number one, off the bat, what exactly are shin splints and what do you need to know about them? The injury is literally, and this is kind of terrifying, microfractures of your bone and is generally felt, you guessed it, in your shin. Typically midway-ish down the tibia between your knee and your ankle on the front or the front side of your leg. Discomfort is it's typically within like a 5 centimeter area or more, and the timing can vary from between 10-20 minutes. You can get better into a run and maybe come back afterwards, and it's often felt upon palpitation, so you could kind of push and feel where it hurts on your shin. The progression of this injury happens where your tibia, that big bone in the front of your foot, is healthy to where you're starting to kind of slightly overload it through running. As with many injuries, your training load starts to outpace the ability of your body to regenerate, rejuvenate, and keep up with the work that you're putting your body through. If you continue to run through this slight shin discomfort, it can eventually develop into a full-blown stress fracture. And while you're running, your bones bend in just the tiniest amount, kind of like a beam on a bridge. In running, those who have healthy bones and who are training at an appropriate level, this isn't a problem. However, if your training load is excessive or your bones are weak, this repeated stress and torque and compressive forces can result in an injury. So one thing I always like to bring up here is shin splints versus compartment syndrome. This is a very important distinction that must be made. It's the difference between two shin injuries, shin splints and compartment syndrome. Now I've touched base a bit, and I'll talk more a little bit about shin splints, but let's talk briefly about compartment syndrome, which is, it's a muscle and like a fascia issue, not a bone issue. Now, compartment syndrome is when the tibialis anterior muscles up front on your lower leg become excessively tight from typically exercise. If your shin muscles are experiencing pain, cramping, numbness, and potentially like visible cramping or bulging, you might have this injury. So if that's something that you're experiencing, you're watching the wrong video, you're reading the wrong article, look up compartment syndrome, and this can be helped along in various ways. Rest might not cut it. You better go see a PT. But that's past the purview of this video. Let's talk about shin splints. So we talked about what they are. Let's talk about how to prevent them. And I tell new clients that come to me for coaching that my job as their coach, number one, is to get them to where they want to be with their goals uninjured. Now, the two primary ways I manage this injury prevention are with strength work and managing their training load. And managing this training load often comes down to making sure their easy runs are truly easy, regenerative, and restorative. They're not accumulating fatigue through their what they think are easy runs. Now, talking more about shin splint prevention, a review of the literature from a few years back looked at 165 papers and included 21 studies. Now, the primary risk factors for shin splints were high body mass index. So the heavier you were, or the heavier these people were, the more likely they were to develop shin splints. High amount of overpronation, and keep in mind that some pronation is normal and necessary. Greater greater ankle plantar flexion range of motion. So plantar flexion is when you point your toes down, and high hip external rotation, or when your hips, when you're running, rotate outwards rather than staying in more of a straight line. These were risk factors of shin splints. Specifically, one of the most curious ways to prevent shin splints is actually to survive the "I'm a new runner" period. A paper titled Contributing Factors to Medial Tibial Stress Syndrome, Shin Splints, a prospective investigation found that those who had been running for less than 5 years were significantly more likely to develop shin splints. Now, the reason for this is that just as with muscles, when you do bicep curls, you're literally like causing micro tears in your muscle fiber, and your muscles adapt and get stronger. They super compensate. And this is true for your bones as well. But you got to give them time. And it's different because with a muscle, you cramp and you're like, okay, I need to stop. I can't do this. Your brain tells you that you're done. But with bone, it's not quite as quick or sudden or forceful until you maybe have a full-blown injury. So there has been a lot of research looking at how to prevent this injury. And this injury actually can account for as much as 50% of lower leg injuries. That's a lot. One review looked at insoles, foam heel pads, like heel cord stretching, and alternative footwear, as well as graduated running programs, which I assume is just like a good running schedule, and found that none of these offer any great support for the compared to the for intervention. So all of these things that normal people would normally assume were helpful, none of them were really better or worse than each other for preventing shin splints. And one of the studies that I talked about here briefly found that orthotic use was actually a risk factor. And this is curious. And in this case, I wonder if maybe these people were wearing orthotics due to potentially high overpronation, like I mentioned earlier. And so in fact, the navicular drop, the overpronation, was the risk factor, in which case the orthotics would be deemed a failure. To continue to confuse us even further, there has been other research suggesting that when controlling for orthotic use, only body mass index was an associated risk factor, and navicular drop, aka overpronation, may not, for this study anyway, was not an appropriate measure to actually identify people who were at a higher risk of shin splints before they got them, and they found no significant difference between they found no significant association between shin splints and pronation amount. So you can't always just say, oh, you're injured, you overpronate. It's not how that works. So to kind of conclude here a little bit, what we know about preventing shin splints is that really let's go with getting over shin splints. The only real concrete factor for preventing shin splints might be to not be overweight. But if you are overweight, that's not a reason to not run. You just got to be more careful. You got to follow a smart training procedure, do your strength work, have healthy bones, eat a good diet, and you'll probably be okay. Now, healing from medial tibial stress syndrome. How do we get over this if we have it? Multiple literature reviews simply suggest that, unfortunately, rest is equal to or better than almost any other treatment option. And clearly, this is not the suggestion we want, but this is what we got, people. So this is maybe more of a push to just not get shin splints. And what's curious is that on Twitter and Facebook, I asked about people's experience with shin splints and what helped. And there were tons of comments about changing shoes, changing their lacing pattern, KT tape, and many of these things helped almost instantly. Yet, it's curious because when you look at the literature and the science, none of these have helped in the literature. So what's going on here? Now, I can only speculate on this, but perhaps these runners who were replying to my shin splint question didn't have shin splints. Maybe they were, like I said at the start of this video, just calling any shin discomfort shin splints, when in fact something like compartment syndrome, for example, can be helped by changing your foot strike. A midfoot landing loads the shins less than a heel strike. So new shoes, different lacing pattern, changes how your feet move, how your legs are loaded, and that could help with compartment syndrome. So maybe some of these people weren't having shin splints, a bone issue. They just had something else, and thankfully they were able to get over it. So if you liked what you learned and you want to get more information on my sometimes unconventional yet proven, down-to-earth and simple training tactics for helping my runners improve their running through sustainable training habits, nutritional guidance, developing great mindfulness practices, and incorporating easy-to-do running-specific strength and mobility work, and having it all come together with some great accountability and motivation, visit kylecrans.com. Check out my website, check out what I have to say, and if you want to get started and talk more about coaching and working together, getting you through or over an injury, getting you to that first marathon or the next race uninjured, get a hold of me now. Let's talk. What I don't want to happen is, actually, I don't want you to regret, because you should fear only regret. New shoes from Atreyu. And I don't want you to regret not contacting me right now. I don't want to hear from you in 2 months and 3 months saying, Coach Kyle, I wish I would have contacted you a couple months ago, but here I am. And if you get to that place, by all means, contact me. Let's get started. But contact me now. Let's get started. Let's get you over this hump, get you stronger, faster, more mindful, and just in a better training state. And you'll be better off 3 months from now than I think you are now. So questions, comments, drop them below. And as always, you keep running. I'm going to keep coaching.